Good day, everyone. Some people have said that Kokomi is like a luxury unit in that she's only there to enable certain team comps for endgame players and so on. And I think this is a view I don't really sort of ascribe to, and I'll sort of explain it in this video. And we'll sort of explain it from a sort of typical average Genshin gamer's perspective as well as from an endgame perspective. And we'll mostly talk about this from an F2P side of as well. So from a well perspective, things get quite a bit different. So what do we mean by luxury unit? Well, the implication, and I haven't had any proper definitions on it, but I think the implication here is that Kokomi is not really there if you want to play in game and so on. She's not a real damage dealer. She's just another support. She enables a bunch of team comps, but in and of herself, there are many other ways of sort of doing things. And I think the sobering reality is that characters like Bennett, Xiangling, Xingshu, and Kazuha also fit the very same definition of being luxury units, and that is because, well, you don't need any of them to clear content, and it's not just on my channel, but many other people from an F2P perspective have cleared this Spiral Abyss with minimal Bennett use, minimal Kazuha use, minimal Xiangling and Xingshu use, and this is the most important thing to sort of realize. All of the units in Genshin Impact are sufficient units, but none of them are really strictly necessary. I think the biggest bias comes from the fact that certain units were released like early and other units were released later on, and then you also get like a bit of like overlap between like functions and abilities and so on, and then the idea sort of comes, well, since I already have unit X, unit Y is just simply an upgrade and therefore by extension a luxury. And I don't think this is kind of like a very truthful way of looking at things, because if, let's say, a unit like Kokomi had been available from the start, I think you would probably be able to flip around the arguments. And this is the thing that a lot of people are not really aware of. You need to have multiple perspectives. So let's just talk about the first perspective, and that is what happens to the average Joe, like the average person on their mobile phone. They're not interested in Spiral Abyss, they're not interested in floor 12, the end game. They just want to sort of go through the overworld. So what's the life like for them? Well, if they have Kokomi, they've got a walking statue of 7. They've got a unit that now allows them to continue their exploration. Her ability is not tied to an elemental burst. You don't need to worry about sort of healing. It's not going to take forever like with Barbara to generate energy for your burst in any case. And what it does is it allows you to continue. It allows you to have greater gameplay exploration without having to go and cook food, without having to backtrack to the nearest statue of 7. That's what makes Kokomi so good for the overworld, but for anything from world levels like 0 to about 6 or 7, Kokomi is an absolutely monster of a DPS, and think about it. Kokomi scales off of flat HP. That means her linear scaling far surpasses all of the DPS of all the other units at those given world levels. It's only later on here from like world level 7, 8 when you get way more crit rate artifacts and crit damage artifacts that your other units actually now start sort of power creeping Kokomi in terms of damage. They sort of start to outscale what she can do. And this is completely normal and expected. We're supposed to expect that the damage dealers get very good at dealing damage, but by no way or means does that make Kokomi a luxury unit. It just means that she's a support like many of the other supports, and each of the supports in the game have like a different way of like supporting, so there's nothing luxury about it. It's just a gameplay style. As you can see in the background, I'm running main DPS Kokomi. This is just a play style that is now accessible to me because I've got her at C6, but it is by no means the only way of playing. And I know a lot of people might be like, but what about meta? Well, you don't get any brownie points for beating the game using meta characters. It's totally just up to you as to how you want to curate the game. Do you want to play those units that are shown on a spreadsheet, mind you, to be good? And this is also what I've been taking a lot of issue with a lot of people, and I've said, look, you can't just take an expected value that's been written on a spreadsheet, assuming certain flat substats and energy recharge rates, and not properly dealing with the randomness of the game. You need to look at damage in this game from the perspective of a distribution. In other words, how often you get a certain spread of outcomes. And what you then need to do is you need to take two very competitive teams, compare these damage distributions, and then say, well, okay, which one would stochastically dominate the other one? That's how you properly work out on a meta. And the thing that you would very soon, which you'd realize very soon, is that for a lot of these spiral abysses and so on, a lot of teams have very much like overlapping damage distributions. In other words, even if you play the so-called meta, the full, like the maximum damage sort of team comp or whatever, very often that's not really even necessary. And you might even find that from Spiral Abyss to Spiral Abyss, the most meta team is not even one that you can afford as an F2P, because now it's going to be a Tartaglia Taser team, and now it's going to be just a Rider National. Next time it's just a Morgana or whatever. At the end of the day, what you need to realize is, how do you want to play the game, and do you like sort of playing it with the characters that you've gotten? Certain characters are released for the very purpose of enabling you to do things in a more consistent way. That's what makes certain units better than other units. That's what makes certain teams meta at some points than other teams. It's about how often you can get your damage and how consistently you can get that damage on the field. And this is what Kokomi enables, like any other unit, in her own special way. And that by no means makes her luxury. It just means that she's another unit in the game. And I think this is the thing that people want to throw in arguments like a luxury unit, because they very well know that how much like this character does. They know how much Kokomi can actually enable in all of the various team comps. And yes, it's not the top part of damage and so on, but honestly, do you really need it? Or do you just want to have a character as an F2P that you like looking at, that you like the personality, the story, and that you're happy to play hundreds of hours with because your resources are limited? And if the answer is yes, then all you need to do is look up a Kaching mains guide. There are many YouTubers that give you good guides, and all that will happen is you'll be able to make better sort of gameplay decisions and builds and whatever, and then you can still have very good success with the units that you like. And honestly, for a game like Genshin Impact, that is the most important thing. Nothing else really matters. So from my perspective, Kokomi is not a luxury unit. She is just like every other unit. She's got her pros, she's got her cons, and at the end of the day, it's up to you, your playstyle, as to how you want to use it. From a world perspective, I'll just mention this briefly. Characters like Kokomi can enable very extremely damaging team comps, like with Ayaka and Shenhe, to such a point that if I had to replace Kokomi with Bennett to get more damage, Bennett would actively harm my team. He would actively be a detractor, and that by in and of itself, from that sort of whale perspective, means to me that Kokomi is not just a luxury unit, but in terms of some of the most top damaging team comps at a C6 level, she's kind of a necessity. But that is definitely a different discussion, so we can have that on another day. But yeah guys, that's all from my side. Thanks for watching, and cheers.